wish to introduce our next speaker, and it will also guide the panel discussion. I wish to introduce to you Moses Kemibaro, the founder and CEO of Doti Savvy, who will be moderating our esteemed panel on infrastructure foundation for AI ML in retail insurance. With over 15 years of experience in digital marketing strategy, technology, integration, and business application, his expertise spans various industries, including his tenure as Africa Sales Director at InMobi and the founding regional manager at Dealfish East Africa, now known as GG Kenya. Please join me in welcoming Moses Kemibaro, a true digital trailblazer, to take us through this last session of the day. Thank you very much, Karibu.
Thank you so much.
All right, please introduce your panelists.
So our next session is revolutionizing insurance with AI and ML, practical pathways for product and operational excellence. We'll be joined on this panel by Martin Kariithi from ICEA Lion. Martin, are you here? Oh, fantastic. Karibu sana. Please give him a hand. We also have Alfred Mukudu from Amazon AWS. Karibu sana, Alfred. And lastly, we have Harrison Lee representing Huawei. So this particular panel, we're going to explore the technological foundations necessary for adopting and deploying and scaling artificial intelligence and machine learning within the insurance sector. At the same time, we're going to aim to explore how robust infrastructural support facilitates the integration of AI ML, focusing on the balance between innovation, cost efficiency, security, ethical implications, which is also very important, and particularly in regions such as Africa where concerns are paramount. So as we jump into it, I'd just like to ask our panel a general question, and really just trying to understand what are the infrastructural elements that are critical for supporting an AI ML in insurance. And maybe we can start off with you, Martin. Give us your perspective, please.
Okay, thanks for that question, and thanks for having us on this panel. I think the first thing starts with the quality of your data. And that will be a recurring issue at whatever stage of maturity you're at as an organization. You still will have to watch like a hawk the quality of your data. And that's because a lot of it tends to be humans are actually inputting that information into the system. So for a process that is greatly repeated, sometimes there might be understandable errors in information. So you really want to make sure that you have a strong data governance strategy for cleaning up and maintaining the quality of your data. And I think that's for the first level of just being able to create and deploy ML solutions at your organization. And of course, I've not mentioned real-time deployment. I mean initial deployment as probably as a report or some kind of insights that are generated.
So ultimately, it's really about when you do your training, the quality of the data determines the quality of the output. I think what we used to call garbage in, garbage out, yeah? Yeah. What about the Amazon perspective? What would you say, Alfred?
So first of all, thank you for having me. I think, if I talk about infrastructure, being from a cloud service provider, I'll kind of give you the way we look at it. And we use a mental model where we look across infrastructure across 3 layers, right? So at the very bottom, you've got the hardware, networking, the compute, the chips you need to run the models. You have to have good technology infrastructure in place to be able to participate in AI. Then there's a middle layer around the actual models that you use, right? And this is the space that Martin is speaking to, right? How you bring that data in, how you ingest it, whether the databases you're using can support the responsiveness that you need, how many tokens you can support. So you have to have good infrastructure in that layer as well. And then at the very top is the application layer, right? So where you are worried about your end users, your end customers, whether they are internal customers, knowledge workers, or they are your end customers out in the street using your products. And you have to have the good applications and good experiences to allow for that feedback. So you kind of have to have all 3 layers in place. And I think in the context of this discussion of AI, we've taken a stance as AWS and Amazon to try and lift as much of that heavy lifting across all three layers away from people, and therefore bring down cost, and then allow people to participate in AI.
Fantastic, thanks for that. Harrison, I'm very keen to hear the Huawei story because we don't know much about Huawei in this space. We hear other names, and I'd really just love to hear the Huawei perspective on this one.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me introduce more because you said that not so many people understand what we are doing. Okay, so actually, my answer should be more similar to Alfred because we are hyperscaler to do the cloud provider, right? So I also trying to divided the AI infrastructure by different tiers or by layers, right? And then the first one we just call it the fundamental layer, the hardware, right? So I just call it a modernized AI. So modernized AI is after OpenAI was open the door of the world of large model, right? So, we all follow up. And, who is the winner actually is NVIDIA, right? So, but actually in the world, it cannot be only NVIDIA can produce the GPU or NPU, right? Like Google, Amazon, all here, they all, produce their own, manufacturing on the fundamental layer of the NPU or GPU. So similar to us, probably not so many people understand about what we are doing. We just call it the NPU of Huawei Cloud. The branding is ASCENT, A-S-C-E-N-T, ASCENT. So that ASCENT is something like NVIDIA for the GPU, and we produce it as our own capability or proprietary solution on GPU by ourselves, and then we support them as the the large model processing as well as the traditional AI. So this is the first layer, which is called the fundamental, and then second layer is the ecosystem. So NVIDIA is not only for the hardware, but they have a CUDA. They have the AI operators, right? That ecosystem is quite good. And for us, we do have the layer compatible to them as well. And then we offer to the developers, the AI developers, the large model developers for the ecosystem, how to use the, fully utilize the hardware in parallel to train the data, to do the inference. So that is the ecosystem layer. Upper than that one is the framework. Everybody knows that, like developers are using the TensorFlow or PyTorch. So how to fully utilize the IDE to work on your, AI development processes that we can also offer is Manspur. Is that ecosystem for the framework layer, and top on that one you can produce the application layer or industry layer by utilizing those of the trained model, pre-trained model to do more inference on different industries to deeply integration into different industries.
So what I'm hearing you say is that Huawei actually has fully compatible, fully capable alternatives that are available to developers and organizations to essentially deploy their AI workflows.
Yes, definitely.
Fantastic. I'd like to come back to you and just thinking about maybe, ICEA as a business has a regional footprint. I'm sure you're currently, like many organizations here, exploring and experimenting with AI. How are you going about scaling that up and growing sort of your AI competence and propositions across the board?
That's a great question. I would say everything is iterative and you start with small steps. So like I mentioned, you start even before you get to a deployed solution that is actually solving some certain problem. You start with the information that you're actually providing based on that solution. And now I'm focusing a lot on ML and querying different data sets. So you start by, say, I'm providing the sales team with some kind of report on some analytics that are valuable to them. And based on the usage of that, you can actually go to the next level and see, can we actually get this model to be on a real-time deployment? And that's when you start thinking about infrastructure. Who's going to be infrastructure partner? There are different options, and they have different meanings. Whether, as you can see, we have partners here who have that capacity. There are other companies which also have that capacity. So you got to make a decision on what fits you. I like that we're seeing more choice in the market in terms of platforms that you can use. When we started out our journey around 2018, we were looking at different platforms, and we ended up going with a certain platform just based on the fact that it had, by far and away, the strongest data governance built in. So at that time, a lot of the solutions that we're seeing in the market were not even bringing into perspective the data governance side, and were more focused on the compute side. So, once you make that decision, you next have to focus on getting that solution deployed. So you make your infrastructure decision, you get it deployed, and then you work on sensitizing the users on how to appropriately utilize this tool that you've developed. So a lot of steps, but at least at each step you get feedback. So you know whether we're going on the right direction or not in the right direction. So based on user feedback, if they say, oh, this is actually useful, this tool is helping us with this certain process in business, you can then now start focusing on automating it and providing it, building it into the workflows that you have at the application layer. So yeah, that's kind of how I look at it.
Maybe I can extend that question a little bit. One of the things I think we're hearing a lot of now is about the data sovereignty and where the data sits. I don't know how you're addressing that issue, and we'll talk a little bit about that with the other cloud providers, but is that something that has really become a challenge for you, or something that, given again the regional footprint that your business has?
Well, we've built a strong capacity in data governance. So we, as always, will make sure we're in compliance.
Okay, great. What about you, Alfred? Maybe you can tell us about the scaling up and all. And again, congratulations. I saw that Amazon South Africa is finally live, so that's great news. And we hope it's coming to Kenya soon.
Yeah, please go to amazon.co.za. Launched on Tuesday, so go buy something. That'd be great. So look, on the scaling question, and then maybe I'll come to the data sovereignty second. So on the scaling question, I think you kind of have to think about scaling within an organization relative to what your demand is from your customers, right? So the whole model of going to cloud is for you to be able to match supply to demand, right? It's about not having to guess how much infrastructure you're going to use, and you only pay for what you use. So as organizations scale, they'll start to grow their footprint and match what the value they're getting out of those investments is going to be. Our role from Amazon and an AWS perspective is to ensure that we're providing the services in a secure way and the infrastructure that allows people to scale. So when we looked at investments, look, Amazon's been around since AWS has been around since 2006, but our presence in Africa is pretty much, very much day one. So we looked at the continent. We saw lots of potential, lots of customer demand coming our way, and we committed over $2 billion to invest in the infrastructure, right? So we built the Africa region. What we've since done is we've announced local zones, which are sort of smaller versions of those regions. So we announced a local zone for Nairobi, we announced one for Johannesburg, we announced one for Lagos, and we launched Lagos, and we've got customers using that infrastructure there. And then what we've also done is we've looked at the edge computing you need. So you'll get to a point where for data sovereignty, you might need to run certain workloads within a country. For latency reasons, think of payments use cases, trading, you might need to run things as close as you can to your customers in large urban centers. And this is where these local zones come in. But we've got another variant called outposts, which is a physical server that we can ship into a customer's premises. So outposts are being used by quite a number of customers here in Kenya. And those investments on the infrastructure side are allowing us to stretch that Cape Town region all the way across the continent and try and cover as much ground as we can, and thereby enable you to run those services in those spaces. The other thing we're doing just from a scaling perspective, and I think for me this is the more important bit, is kind of how do you enable the communities that are going to use these solutions, right? The customers, the partners. And so we've pumped a lot of money into enabling and training people. So we launched a skill center in Cape Town. It's the first outside of the US that launched last year. We've also launched a development center here in Nairobi. We've got offices at Kofisi Square and another development center down in Cape Town. So we're looking at the continent and taking a long view and saying, as you know, partners and customers and enterprises start to use these technologies and scale, we'll be available to support that.
Well, that's fantastic. I didn't know the scope of activities is that broad, but essentially what you're saying is the infrastructure is there, development centers, the outpost technology as well. So really, you know, sort of proliferating across the continent, multiple levels, right?
Absolutely. We're super busy, and it's exciting. And like I said, our Nairobi, Lagos, Johannesburg offices, those are maybe 2 years old. So it's really, really day one for us. So we're looking at the continent, and we're taking a very long bit on where we think things are going to go. And in the meantime, we're trying to figure out what kind of solutions do you need us to build. So the services I spoke about on that middle layer and the top layer, right? 90% of our pipeline and feature roadmap is built based on customer requests. So if you contact us and you say, I need a certain way to access a database, or my users need a different way to present information, we put that into what we call a product feature request, and it goes into that pipeline. The other 10% is things where, you know, people like myself looking at strategy are trying to look around the corner and say, what are the industry challenges people are fighting with? So things like common APIs, interoperability of data standards, those types of things. And then we try and build that ahead of time.
Okay, great. Harrison, what about the Huawei perspective on sort of scaling up across this region?
Yeah, sure. So regarding to the scaling, first of all, I think let's talk about on AI scenario first. Let's focus on AI, right? And so for scaling, you know, we are trying to talk about by two different pillars. The first one is how you train the data. Second one is how you do the inference, to do the prediction real time. So by those two pillars, right, that for the infrastructure scaling is very different, so actually. If you do the training processes, the whole processes will be very fixed, actually. And then initially, we know the workload. We know the data size, how much it is. And then we do have the, you know, how to say, prediction that how long time this data size, those training data size can be trained into a model. And then, you know, how much GPU and CPU to do in parallel to support these training processes. So this is the one that we need to be offered for the developers. And secondly, you know, that is the inference processes. For the inference, it is very on-demand processes, and we don't know what will be happened. If we do the real-time decision making, and then the resources by the GPU or CPU should be very scaling, and then we need to support it. But how we support it, that's why we offer with the customers is not only the infrastructure, but also you know, we just call it the management or developer layer. It's a platform, it's a console. So within there, you do not see the real infrastructure, the fundamental layer in the backend, but you just input the required you know, resources that you used for training the stages, for the prediction stages. And then that one can be scaling by your demand. You can input the minimum, the maximum, the threshold or something like that, and then to make sure that those of the two steps will be scaling according to your requirements. That will be very flexible and the serverless model. So that is the scaling. And then for the data surveillance, on that one, as Alfred introduced for different locations in Africa, it's similar to us. And then we offer we just call it easy to understand the cloud machine, right? So that one, we can offload most of the public cloud services and also the infrastructure for AI training predictions for the GPU and offload into that on-premise cloud infrastructure. And then the customer, you have your data. You just put your data into there, you train yourself, you can also do the prediction by yourself. So that is what we can offer.
Fantastic, thank you for that. So I'd like us to segue into probably one of the more sensitive parts of AI, which is the whole area of ethics, security, and accessibility. And starting off again, from an ICA perspective, how are you dealing with those three key areas to ensure compliance, to ensure that your needs are met as a service provider, but more importantly that, when it comes to the various stakeholders that you serve, that you're really operating in a manner that is, in the right way, so to speak, and also secure and accessible at the same time?
I'd say we focus on treading carefully. As you mentioned, especially when it comes to processes that have direct impact in the real world, you do need to have a certain standard of fairness and make sure that there's no bias in whatever it is you're building up. And you're giving users the right to kind of understand on some level how certain decisions might be made. So you have to be very, very prudent in how you go about making those decisions. You bring in all the key stakeholders. Like I mentioned, we built up our data governance capacity just to answer questions like these, to make sure that we have a strong data governance in place. We have strong policies in place which ensure that we are not running afoul of any not just from a regulatory perspective, but also on treating customers fairly perspective. We want to make sure we're on top of that. So we have increased our capacity in that area, and we believe there's a lot of promise, but you have to tread very carefully with the solutions that you provide at the end user perspective.
Absolutely, especially around things like data privacy and security. I think we're seeing in Kenya how many cases are cropping up when there have been violations or instances where organizations have been compromised. So that's good to hear. Alfred, what about your point of view just in terms of ethics, security, and accessibility?
Sure. So security for AWS is job zero for us. It's where we start with anything that we build, any service that we put out. We ensure that it's very secure. So in the context of generative AI, running large language models, what we've been hearing from a lot of our customers, right, is they don't want to train a model with their data that's going to be used around the world. They don't want to be putting in sensitive IP that's unique to your organization. So say you've got a unique way of doing quote and bind, or your underwriting process is very unique, it's a differentiator for you. You don't want to be putting that data out into a large language model and models that are going to be used by other people. So when we heard this feedback, what we then did is we looked at a way of building these services in a manner that allows you to have complete control. And so the way we do it is we've got a service called Amazon Bedrock, which allows you to pick across multiple large language models. So you can use Meta, Claude, Anthropic. They're all there as a library, as an API. So it takes some of that heavy lifting out. But the key thing from a security perspective is those services run within your AWS account. And so you get to control what data is trained on the model, but you don't have to incur the cost of training billions of parameters. It comes pre-trained, and then you point it at your existing data, and then you can use it. You then get to manage your security standards, your governance, your identity and access management. We've got a mental model for that. We call it separation between security off the cloud, which we take care of, and security in the cloud, which you would take care of. So you get to decide who accesses the data, you get to decide which region you run it on, and you apply the same security protocols and principles that you run as an enterprise onto that AI environment as well. So we've been spending a lot of time thinking through how do we ensure that kind of level of security and privacy, and most importantly, control. We've even got innovations on the infrastructure layer where, for example, we've got an innovation called AWS Nitro, which is kind of a firmware that allows you to separate out the code and the application that's running from the actual instances that we are providing you. So in that instance, no one can access any code you're running on an EC2 instance, not even AWS itself, because of that technology. So we keep looking at ways at how we give customers more trust and comfort and ensure that we adhere to security standards. We also get audited every year, so we comply with over 140 security standards, so your SOC 2s, your FedRAMPs, your HIPAA, your data protections. And we allow customers to inherit those certifications when you use AWS services. And so even within AWS, you can go into a console. There's a product called Artifact. You can pull out reports on each service to give to your auditors to ensure that you're complying to governance. So you never have issues from a three lines of defense perspective. So we've spent a lot of time just thinking through those things, and the idea really is to give customers choice, and we give them the opportunity to choose how they utilize those security services.
So what I'm hearing you say is that it's sort of very multi-layer, and also there's a lot of discretion, but more importantly, there's a lot of flexibility in how your cloud actually works from those sort of three perspectives.
100%.
Right. Harrison, what about your point of view on that?
Yeah, so regarding to the security, I think, so let's also talking about my two pillars. The first one is how the cloud technology can help you to protect the user, to protect your data at rest or in transit. Secondly is the government's methodology, is how the people manage by themselves, right? So first of all, let's say traditional AI, just take an example, the traditional AI. So taking the image to text OCR scenario, for example. So if your data, for example, the Kenya ID card, national ID card, you want to do some of the, I'm not sure some of you guys have logged into the e-visa application website of Kenya. It is very good to use. And you need to upload your passport, the snapshot, right? You take the snapshot and upload. Actually, this upload processes and then read it, the required information into a text. This process is already uploaded to somewhere, to do the detection and then to translate your image into the text. Do you think that is secure or not? Actually, if this one was offered by a cloud provider, it is mandatory for a cloud provider to help you to once you click upload, and then you get the results. Those end-to-end processes, the cloud provider need to have the responsibility to make sure that it's secure. And for example, the data uploaded to the cloud, we help you to do the HTTPS, to do the base 64. And then nobody can decrypt it. And after you process this on the cloud, for example, you invoke the API for the OCR processes, and then these processes we do in memory only, not stored on the cloud storage, on object storage or something. We don't store it. And after the results gets the text value response to you, and then the text value can also be encrypted during the transaction processes, and finally outputs into your websites. So those steps, I just take an example, those steps should be very secured. So this is traditional AI, okay? Secondly is the we just call it large model or LLM. Just taking example, we have a lot of open source technology like Llama 2, Llama 3, GPT-2, right? Those of the technologies, if we want to use it, actually, that is already a pre-trained model. So the sensitive data actually is already precise, already finished by the other player. And then they gave you the pre-trained model. What other customer, what our guys need to do is that how to make sure if you do the SFT stages, if you do the fine-tuning stages, by ingesting your data, how to make sure your data is secured. So that's why what we need to do is that bring the pre-trained model by leveraging your data into your on-premise cloud. Train it, get your model, put it into the public cloud to do the prediction. So those steps also help you to protect your data to make sure that during the training processes, only you can control it. But also, we have the user authentication, authorization for different separate roles to do it. So that is what we can do.
Thank you so much, Harrison. So as you can hear, security and also thinking about ethics, accessibility is a very big theme. And again, given that we are only within 30 minutes for this session, I'd like to now open this to the floor so that if any of you have any questions, we have Amazon, Huawei, we have ICEA. Now would be the time to ask any questions, 1 or 2 questions at most. It would be highly appreciated if any of you would like to ask them a question.
This goes to Alfred. You mentioned stuff to do with transfer learning in instances where a company doesn't want really to expose their data to training. Yeah. What happens in the case that the pre-trained model has more parameters than the data that we have in place? How is that going to skew our bias? So that when we input, we want to ask it to achieve something, it doesn't really give us the output we're interested in, but then it picks those parameters from those pre-trained weights.
Okay, so I think you kind of have to think about what you're doing with the models, right? So if you're using a large language model, which are the ones I was referring to on Bedrock, it will have billions of parameters and it's pre-trained. But you have to remember that large language models are there to generate, right? It's generative AI. So you can then do things like, let's say you want to chat with a contract, check if there's an explanation for an underlying condition. What the large language models are allowing you to do, because they're pre-trained, is to interpret the input you've given them. For you to get to a point where you are getting better accuracy and by the way, with Bedrock, you can adjust the sensitivity or the level of hallucination you can get with these models to whatever level you're comfortable with. But if you want to get to a space where you are making actionable insights out of those models, the customers we've seen succeed the most are using a combination of large language models with traditional learning models. They're also using a combination of those large language models with something called retrieval augmented generation. So that's where you ask the large language model a question, it interprets what you just asked it, it then writes the query to go fetch the data, and then it fetches the data from something factual. And then the response that comes back can then be repackaged by the large language model into a simpler language. So my advice, especially for highly regulated entities, right, is try and think of the use cases you want to do and the accuracy you want to get to with the answer, and use a combination of the generative AI models to deal the communication that needs to happen. And then for accuracy, you use things like retrieval augmented generation. You pair it with a machine learning model to get you a specific number that you need. And maybe just a comment, because of those practical considerations, right, what we're seeing is a spike in interest in AI, lots of POCs, and then a very small number of them getting to production in financial services. And it's exactly for that reason, right? If you cross the line into fiduciary advice, you don't want to be the first person who finds out from the regulator how they feel about it. So you're going to have to find ways to experiment, use the large language models, but always try and figure out how to combine them with actual factual data in your environment.
That was a great response, Alfred. I don't know if there's any more questions before we shift to the next panel. So if there are no more questions, I think I'd like to give each of you a chance to give us your parting shot. Starting off with you, sir. Any last comments or feedback that you'd like to share with the audience?
My last feedback is we're about to get into a very interesting age. We now have access to the hardware for these solutions. We have access to frameworks that are available open source, so you even have the software component. And now with the rise in digital, which is just growing exponentially, we're getting the data coming into the ecosystem. So now we suddenly have so much more information and so many more, and a large number of tools to actually deal with that information. In fact, I think we actually spoiled for choice when it comes to tools. Like when you think of LLMs, within the last year, we had like really strong output from several organizations. So we are actually getting into a very exciting stage where we will see more solutions driven by these, by using these technologies, which will mean hopefully better service for our end users, which is what our goal is. Remember, for us, technology is just a tool. It's not necessarily the service that you provide. So it's a tool that facilitates whatever service it is you're providing. And now we are in the position to really optimize the usage of that tool. So I'm very excited to see the next few years what kind of solutions come into the market.
Absolutely great. Alfred?
I love that. That's really good customer obsession. I think it resonates with how we think of the world as Amazon and as AWS. It's around focusing on your customers. It reminded me of our CEO has an interesting expression. He says there's no compression algorithm for experience. And so where you want to be as an organization is in a space where you are getting as much experience as possible. Now, to get that experience, you have to experiment a lot, right? Try out new things, test things out in your customers, in your markets, build localized solutions. And so what you want to do then is to be able to really, really introspect about who you are as an organization and how you are servicing your customers. Take things that are not core to that out of your organization. So remove that undifferentiated heavy lifting, shorten your innovation cycles, and hopefully you can start to deliver things that are impactful for your customers. And so for us as AWS, that's kind of the sweet spot because we provide the infrastructure and that's great. We've got innovation mechanisms to help customers. And those are all designed to take that heavy lifting out of it. Don't spend time spinning up servers and patching them and upgrading them. Move that stuff out into the cloud and then just focus purely on the innovation. So that's all I end.
Thank you so much. Finally, Harrison.
First of all, I think we need to do more advertisement, right? Yeah, and secondly, my keyword is experiences. So what's that mean? So we are not only offer the platform for developers, but also, we have a lot of use cases in China. In there, we do have a lot of use cases, data, population. So AI is not only a technology, but you need to have the industry-specific scenarios need to be landing, right? Whenever the airplane fly too much high, but finally you need to be on landing, right? So we are glad to bring our customer use case, to bring our experiences with the real world AI in different industries, to bring it to you. And then once we have that useful case, we are embrace African markets to make sure that the African people can enjoy the AI by a little bit easy to entry into it. Not only start from scratch, but you can enjoy it on the top of the shoulder of the giant.
Great, thank you so much to our panelists. I think you've heard it all. They do have the governance, they do have the structures, they do have the accessibility, they have the security, and all the things they need for you and your organizations to get the most out of their platforms. We've also heard from ICEA, who are doing interesting things, and they've managed to sort of work around some of the challenges that make AI possibly a daunting task for many insurers. I think we've heard from Alfred how AWS has really sort of looked at all the possibilities in terms of what you might need, giving you all the options, different LLMs and so forth within the systems, but also giving you the peace of mind that they're secure, and also giving you the flexibility to be secure yourself. And lastly, by having Huawei, I think we've also heard the other side. We're seeing another organization that also is able to serve your needs, and most importantly, are well positioned to provide a suitable platform for all your AI workloads. So thank you very much to our panelists. Please give them a hand. And I think there's some gifts being given out. Kariithi, are you coming forward to do the handovers?